What is the most ridiculous thing you've seen in court? I'm a family law attorney, so I see a lot of people at their worst. But one case was absolutely disgusting. I originally started out taking some pro bono cases where the court specifically linked attorneys up with people with disabilities who could not afford attorneys. Generally, these people were very nice, and I enjoyed working with them to get the help they needed. But this one woman, she was a complete piece of garbage. I didn't generally get much information prior to meeting with these clients, and so I went into most initial meetings blind. When I walked into the room, I was initially confused because the woman didn't look like she had applied to the program. She had a Michael Kors purse, an Apple Watch, and a Burberry trench coat. Keep in mind that one of the major factors in getting my help was intransigence. I got some information after that she continually used a significantly minor disability to get free legal aid to, in essence, go after her ex-husband. We began talking and she told me about how her ex mistreated their children. I listened to her story and it actually made a lot of sense. Her son, who was nearly 18 years old, actually left her ex's home to come live with her, and her daughter had made a 911 call, which I read the transcript of. So I looked at the file and was a little confused to see that this woman had lost all visitation rights to both her kids. This was a big deal because it almost never happens. Even substance-addled parents generally get supervision visitation. She had nothing. When I asked what happened, she told me that the judge was corrupt. I knew the judge well, so I told her that I didn't believe that was the case. She then proceeded to regale me with information about how the female judge was in a secret relationship with her ex's now wife. Once that was out, it was all she ever talked about. She had pieces written online about it. She actively told me, time after time, that she could prove it. She talked about it more than she talked about her kids. Fast forward to a couple of weeks before the hearing, and I get a stack of printed text messages from the opposing attorney with hundreds, if not thousands, of texts between her and the daughter she was to have absolutely no contact with by court order. The texts went from bad to worse. The daughter was in middle school, and it was clear the mom was manipulating the daughter to skip school and have a secret rendezvous where the mother would buy her expensive clothing. So that was definitely a major strike against her, and it was most likely enough to deny any request she was seeking. But there was so much more, including prejudicial generalities and constant coaching to leave her ex's care. The worst, though, was a text chain that indicated her mom had been feeding her the wrong relationship ideals. We lost well before the hearing happened. At the hearing, the judge, different from the one the mom hated, did what every reasonable judge would do and denied the request. At which point the mother stood up and started yelling in front of a full courtroom that everyone there was in on it. She was held in contempt and ordered to pay a fee for every day the other child wasn't returned to the father's care. She said that she didn't give a damn and would just pay the fee. At this point the judge said, "Well, if that's the case, I will annotate the file to inform the court admin that you should be able to pay for your own attorney going forward." I lost the hearing, but damn did that loss feel good. Story 2. My dad was a lawyer. My senior year, a school let students who didn't have to retake the standardized test do service learning for those days. I chose to shadow my dad at a big jury trial he had going on, and a friend of mine who'd already graduated tagged along. It was a beautiful Tuesday morning in September. When my friend and I were driving to my dad's house, we heard a news report that someone crashed a plane into a prominent landmark. Bob and Tom were joking about it. We walked into my dad's house just in time to see the second plane hit on live TV. Bob and Tom weren't joking when we got back to the car to go to court. That day in court was surreal. The lawyers knew what was going on. The judge and prosecutor knew what was going on. The jury had no clue, though. And everyone was stuck in the courtroom in immediate blackout since they weren't going to have the TV on in the background during a jury trial. My friend and I were the only ones there, watching the trial as observers. We were the only ones who could go out and listen to the news, and so we were the only way for anyone in that room to have any idea what was going on outside. So we'd bring in updates when they had brief breaks, and people were low-key freaking out as they were trapped in this room going ahead with the trial that probably shouldn't have happened that day, and the only news was coming from a high school kid walking across the street to listen to updates on NPR in his car. Security also really tightened up between arriving in the morning and leaving for lunch. We didn't end up spending much time in the courtroom observing because people were asking for updates. The Justice Center was like a ghost town, with only the guards up front, and they were looking around like they were expecting something terrible at any moment. The guy got convicted. My dad tried to get a retrial or something because of the circumstances, but it never happened. Story 3. There was the lady who fake fainted during a hearing when the attorneys were at sidebar. She held onto the chair she got on her knees and threw herself on the ground like a 2-year-old having a tantrum. The judge and attorneys glanced her way and continued speaking. Then there was the time I told my client we would lose about 11 billion times, but she still insisted on going to trial. And shocker, we lost. So when I took the group around the corner to tell them the news, she started sobbing and slid down the wall, all dramatic, while her new guy threatened to rough up the other party. At a restraining order hearing, some guy decided it would be okay to say he wanted to hurt his wife in the hallway. My client heard it and told me. I told the bailiff and left. Apparently the bailiff told the judge. Dude was immediately handcuffed and thrown in a holding cell, and I was called back to court about it. Apparently he didn't really mean it. All that bravado went away real quick once the steel cuffs hit his wrist. In his first appearance in criminal court, the bailiff missed the woodblock when using the gravel and shattered the glass covering the tabletop. We had to stop the hearings and use the file folders to sweep up all these chunks of glass. That bailiff was teased about breaking the glass for years. And a story I heard but did not witness. In a criminal hearing, the victim's father jumped across the barrier toward the defendant. Bailiff jumps in. The judge couldn't see what was happening, so he pulled out his personal firearm. All attention immediately went towards the bench, with the judge standing there, packing heat. I believe bailiffs took the judge's firearm and got control over the father and defendant. Unsurprisingly, someone ran against the judge in the next election and won. Most people just say ridiculous things rather than do ridiculous things. Story 4. I worked in case management for kids in foster care and had to frequently show up to court to give updates on clients and their children. I have some stories. This one isn't related to any of my cases, but I witnessed this. I was trying to leave the courthouse, and the only way to do that is to go by the criminal divisions. I tried to pass the juvenile criminal division hallway, but saw 3 sheriffs surrounding the older guy in his 50s in a wheelchair, what looked like his teenage grandson. They took up the whole hallway, so I was forced to watch this go down. The grandson was just kind of standing there like he didn't know what to do, but the guy in the wheelchair was cussing up a storm at the sheriffs. He then told his grandson, "Go home and get the firearms. It's going to start soon." The sheriffs were really calm and tried to get him to leave, but the old guy was like, "I'm not leaving until he talks to the judge," and pointed to his grandson. The sheriffs kept telling him that he needs to go or he'll be escorted, and the old guy goes, "What are you gonna do? Tackle an old man in a wheelchair?" So one sheriff took the handles of the wheelchair and started to push the old man down the hallway, but the old guy freaked out and grabbed the wrist of the sheriff and tried to pull him off. Another sheriff, without missing a beat, unholstered her taser and targeted the guy from like 5 feet. The guy in the wheelchair fell out of his chair and onto the ground. The other 2 sheriffs in sync jumped on top of this guy, handcuffed him, and escorted him to the holding cells in the other direction. Story 5. One of the parents on my caseload had their parental rights terminated for the other kids. If you had your parental rights terminated in my state, each kid you have after goes straight to foster care until the courts can figure out if you're capable of taking care of that child. The parent was a habitual user and claimed they were clean. The parent actually made visits and was showing signs of getting clean. The parent had to do a UA, urinalysis, at court, and the judge, who's notorious for being strict, asked the parent point blank, "Are you going to pass or fail?" The parent said he was going to pass. So the judge told the parent to report to the UA area to take a test and to only return if he failed. Well, court was over and the next hearing was about to start. I stuck around to talk to one of the lawyers and up came the parent off the elevator. The parent returned. I was like, "Did you need something?" Hoping the parent didn't fail. The parent said he failed his UA. I rushed into the courtroom before the next hearing and told the DA. The DA rushed to the back and told the judge. The judge came out in fury and yelled, "Everyone clear the courtroom. I want X back in here. Where's your lawyer?" The parent shrugged. The judge pointed to a random court-appointed attorney and said, You fill in as X's lawyer. What the hell is your problem? Don't you want your kid back? Congratulations, you just moved back in visitation privileges." And proceeded to yell at the parent until he cried. Once the parent started crying, the judge was like, "I'm glad you're crying because now you can feel the pain your kids feel. Good riddance. Leave my courtroom now." Story 6. I'm an observer for the plaintiff in a $200 million intellectual property case. It's the second trial in federal court. The first verdict was tossed in procedure. The case concerned the cell phone chip manufacturing process, which was quite complicated and technical, but it was a jury trial. It had also been litigated in Europe as well as Japan, South Korea, and China. The judge gave stern and explicit instructions to the attorneys that there could be no mention of these cases. So at one point, a couple days passed, a defense guy brought up the European case in front of the jury. I might add the firms involved were the number 1 and number 2 law firms in Los Angeles, some of the biggest and most prestigious in the nation. The judge excuses the jury, admonishes the guy, and reaffirms that there should be no mention of the other cases. Jury returns and the guy brings it up again. The judge sends the jury out, angrily telling the guy, "No mention of the other cases." The jury returns and he does it again. The judge dismisses the jury again, tells the federal marshals to open their handcuffs and if the guy repeats it, to cuff him and to take him to jail. The judge angrily asks if all the defense lawyers are going to ignore his instructions. They stammer and say that he isn't with them. The judge is visibly steamed. The jury returns, all eyes to the stupid defense lawyer, marshals ready, standing in the courtroom with cuffs out. Guy's so flustered, he's all red and visibly shaking. He can't continue, so it's adjourned for the day. A lawyer simply does not behave this way in front of a federal judge. He just doesn't. It was crazy. We won the case. Plaintiff, and the original award of $200 million was reduced to $20,000. The antics did not help their case. Story 7. I was there to contest a $250 ticket, which was issued in error when a cop ticketed everyone in one lot for parking illegally in private property. Mine was the only car actually allowed to be there. So the guy who went up before me had been ticketed for parking illegally in front of a handicap-only meter, which has a red top in DC. He had brought pictures to show that there were no signs near where he parked to indicate that red top meters are exclusively for handicapped use. He lived in Maryland, he said, was not aware of that DC law. Since there were no signs, he argued that he couldn't have known. From what the judge was saying, it seemed like he was about to excuse the ticket when the guy, I can only guess thinking that this would somehow help him, threw in that he was MPD, and as such, he was a very upstanding citizen who would never break the law unknowingly. The judge immediately ordered him to pay the full ticket amount and advised that, since he was a DC cop, he should probably make sure to familiarize himself with the laws he was supposed to enforce. Boy, it's a whole different world in those courtrooms, huh? Maybe I should try and observe a court hearing at least once. I'll have to include that on my bucket list. Anyway, if you're enjoying the content so far, hit those like and subscribe buttons for more crazy stuff coming your way. Story 8. Back when I first started, I was in court with my father-in-law, also an attorney, and he was arguing with the judge and took issue with something the judge said by saying, "That sounds like something a Yale man would say." The judge asked, "How did you know I went to Yale?" "I saw your ring when you were picking your nose." Yeah, it's good to practice with a bunch of old country lawyers. Just today, I got into a heated argument in court with opposing counsel, and we both had pretty raised voices and our client started to cry. So the opposing counsel said, "No, it's okay, this is just how we argue. We still love each other," and came over and gave me a hug. The judge didn't say a word. Another time I was arguing that a guy should not get probation because he was refusing to take random substance screenings. He explained he wasn't refusing. He just thought we were wasting our efforts because he'd just admit he smoked grass all the time. Then there was the criminal defendant who came to court wearing a hoodie that said, "I came to mess stuff up," and the lady who pulled into the courthouse parking lot beside the sheriff's department and in front of the canine officer who was standing with his dog in the next parking space, with a veritable pharmacopoeia in her car. Refusing a test because you've already admitted it? Pretty ballsy. Story 9. I was an intern working for an attorney in family law. Annoyingly nasty divorce. The opposing party leaves first and we hold back for a bit before leaving. Standard operating procedure. We go down the stairs and around the corner towards the exit. And what do you know? It's the disgruntled former husband with a barrage of colorful insults and he has cranked the volume knob to about 12 out of 10. Enter me. About 6 foot, 175 pounds, clearly working for an attorney, and in notably better shape than him. Confident he wouldn't try anything as there are cops everywhere and one approaching to investigate the disturbance. I feel emboldened and step between my client and opposing party and begin to say, "Hey, calm down, man. Now's not the time," or dude went for it. I was not expecting that. I doubled over immediately. He gets tackled by the nearest officer, cuffed, and dragged away, presumably to the jail next door. The partner is clearly trying to contain her laughter and our client is on one knee asking if I'm okay. Meanwhile, I'm dying of embarrassment and trying not to chuck up my breakfast. Bro took one for the team. Story 10. I watched a guy sitting in a substance court fall asleep, start snoring, then suddenly burst out this lion's roar, yell, or growl. The judge called him up and asked if he was on anything. "No, Your Honor, I'm just tired from working overnight." It's 3 p.m. His probation officer decided to test him. Being the only male in the courtroom, I was elected to take him to the bathroom and witness him go in a cup. Tested positive for 2 to 3 things. He was sanctioned 5 nights in jail for lying to the judge and had to restart the program from the beginning. He was pretty close to being in the last step. Another time, on a revocation docket, we were sitting waiting for the jail defendants to be brought up. They were filling out some continuance motions and we heard this loud hiss and exhale. The lone guy in the galley had decided to take the biggest hit off his vape, right there in the court. The judge was furious and ordered him up to the bench. He started crying, stating it went off in his hand. The vape cloud was the full length of the 15-foot bench. He went to jail for contempt. We're not sure what he was there for, though. Story 11. Well, I second-chaired for a client during a jury trial who really needed to go to the bathroom, and the judge said no. He wet his pants during voir dire. Court officers had to replace the chair and likely had to clean it too. And of course, everyone in the system automatically blamed the defendant. It's funny how little it takes for a so-called civilized legal system to stop treating people like human beings. Wanting to rush through an already rushed process, for example, or having a person be presumed innocent, which clearly means they're a horrible lying sociopath who's faking having to go just to be a petty piece of crap. In a better legal system, that judge would have had to have cleaned that chair. Story 12. I was installing furniture and equipment in a courthouse office. I'm walking into the building with all of my tools waiting in line to be cleared by security. The man in front of me steps up to the metal detectors and grabs one of the baskets you use to empty your pockets. In the basket, the man places his watch, his necklace, wallet, keys, cell phone, grass sack, and firearm. He then casually walks through the metal detector and looks back at the officer to get his belongings. The 3 officers and several people standing around are stunned. After a few seconds, the officer with the basket says, "Put your hands behind your back?" The guy didn't fight them. He just refused to believe he had done anything wrong. He was there for a substance offense. Of course, it's company policy never to imply ownership in the event of a grass sack. We have to use the indefinite article of a grass sack, not your grass sack. Story 13. So I used to intern for a judge. Most of his cases involved substances, DUI, or rough trade. One day a woman is brought up from jail from a hearing, substance-related. She's a regular in the courtroom and is in one of the substance dependency programs. Judge. Tell me what happened. Woman. I was leaving the methadone clinic and this guy asked if I wanted some really good icky stickies. Judge. He asked what? Woman. If I wanted some really good icky stickies. Lawyer whispers to her. Judge. Some icky stickies? Woman. Yes, really good icky stickies. From here it turned into something very comparable to the Super Troopers littering and moment while we all tried to avoid laughing. Judge. I take it you used it and that is why you're here. Woman. I did, and it was damn good. I mean, at least she was honest about it. Story 14. The defense attorney was tased and tackled by federal marshals after the acquittal of his client. He had been insufferable for the entire trial and threw a fit when the marshals tried to bring his client into custody. Although his client had been acquitted in that trial, he was awaiting trial for a separate crime in another state. Thus, he was supposed to be taken into custody and transferred. His attorney shouted at the judge and tried to block the marshals from accessing his client, but ended up getting tased in the process. His conduct during the trial was outrageous, so much so that the chief judge sought to block the guy from federal practice in the state. He had pro-hawked in and pursued sanctions in his home state. Can you believe what went down in these courtrooms? I sure couldn't until I started sharing these stories with you. If you're up to more courtroom absurdities, head over to the next video. Lawyers, what was your oh crap moment in court? Story 2 is straight up embarrassing. See you there.